have you ever met a student who seemed to be kind of addicted to warnings?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and what we've come to realize is that kids and adults will always need at least the same number of warnings and reminders as they are given.
Oh, that's true.
So Love and Logic is not big on giving multiple reminders or warnings to students, because we find that they get kind of addicted to them, and then what happens? Well, the more I have to remind you, the more you need being reminded, and the more I have to remind, and it just becomes like a snowball. It gets bigger all the time.
That doesn't sound like it's preparing kids for the world that they're going to experience once they leave school, does it?
No, I don't know too many bosses who really enjoy having to nag and remind their employees to do what they need to do. And I'm telling you, one of the things that we can do that's going to up the odds the most of kids being successful in life is to teach them to complete tasks or do things the first time they're asked. And so one of the things we don't want people to get confused about is that we don't want you to think that these quick and easy interventions are actually warnings that lead up to some sort of a consequence, right?
No.
No. These interventions are simply ways for us to get through the day so that we can continue teaching. Yeah. Right.
And I've seen a lot of schools where, you know, first offense, second offense, third offense, and they're actually conditioning kids to require stiffer and stiffer penalties all the time. It's kind of like that study about the rats. Do you remember the study?
Yeah, absolutely, right. And they did this study where they'd have these rats that were kind of hungry, and they'd have their food over here, and the rats would go over and to the food, and they'd step on a little electric grid. And with some of the rats, they just buzzed them a little bit, and the rat would go over and eat, you know. And then
that'd be like the first time, give them a good time.
Yeah, give them a good time.
Warning.
And then the next time the rat would go over, they'd give them a little more intense shock, and the rat would go over and eat, and they gradually increase it. And what they found out is these rats ended up being pretty slow learners. In other words, they habituated them to the consequence. They desensitized the rats to the consequence. So the rats would only avoid the food if they got a severe shock. And are we doing the same thing with our kids in schools and in homes, where we start with a small consequence, you know, oh, don't do it again, then we gradually increase it, and pretty soon we all sit around and wonder, why is this kid not learning unless they, you know, get some sort of really huge consequence? So Love and Logic is not about giving a bunch of warnings. It's not about increasing the gradual level of the consequences. It's mostly about prevention. And I notice two different types of teachers, and they both have great hearts. Yeah. And one type of teacher goes into the classroom, and every day they say to themselves, well, my job here is to make sure that students learn big life lessons every single day. And every single time a student acts up or misbehaves, the way I'm going to intervene with a student is going to ensure that they learn an important life lesson, right? And these teachers love kids. Now, there's another type of teacher who loves kids just as much, and every day they start the day saying, well, I love kids, and I sure hope they learn some important life lessons when they're with me, but my job is to get through the teaching and do a good job of instructing. Now, which teacher do you suppose has the biggest problems with students?
The first one.
The first one, because what happens is they give lots of reminders, they give lots of warnings, they try to make too big a deal of everything. Instead of using these quick and easy interventions, applying them, and then moving on and saying to themselves, I'm going to save up the consequences for the what? The big important things.
Yeah, and those same teachers are not adverse to saying, oh, that's serious, you're going to need to get a little recovery time, or that's serious, we're going to have to deal with this later on, and provide a consequence, not when they're trying to teach, not when the kid is upset, not when they're upset, but when everybody's got a cool head, and we say, hey, this is what needs to be done, and we do what needs to be done instead of trying to build it up just a little bit at a time.
Yeah, I guess essentially what we're really trying to do with Love and Logic is create kids who don't need to have warning labels on their coffee. You know, it says beverage is hot. You know, we're actually trying to create kids that have enough common sense to know that if they get a really hot coffee, it probably isn't a good idea to rest it right there in between their legs and drive with it. Yeah, that could be dangerous.
That would be quite a gift.
Love and Logic. Love and Logic is all about creating kids who have good, solid common sense.